All right, here we are, kinesiology 231. This is specific to our unit, if you will, on muscular strength, power, and endurance testing, and some of the limitations that I'm sure you're tripping into and finding along the way. So let's take a look at just a couple main ones right now. So the first is, what if my client can't push a 45-pound bar? You know, if somebody comes in, you sit down with them and you do a consultation, and they tell you they haven't worked out in 20 years, chances are they're going to have difficulty pushing a 45-pound bar. They may have the strength, but their technique might be poor. They might not have the smaller muscles to be able to help them stabilize effectively. So you have to look at this and go, okay, at first blush, if they've not worked out in 20 years, perhaps doing a bench press with a bar might not be realistic. And then when you begin to work with them, if they have difficulty even holding themselves up in a push-up position, because they're so deconditioned, well, you can pretty much bet that putting them under a 45-pound bar might not be the way to go. And then you'll also have a situation where you might be in a gym or a setting that doesn't have a 45-pound bar. So you're going to have to find a way to fudge this with dumbbells and come up with some kind of norms for dumbbells. And it won't be an exact science, let me tell you. I mean, you can look up research on dumbbell lifts or weights on dumbbell lifts compared to their cousin or highly related or correlated exercise like a dumbbell bench press and a 45 or a barbell bench press. But I got to tell you, it's not an exact correlation. And then, you know, you have to be able to determine what's going to be proper for your client or not. And if you have somebody who clearly can push around some weight, then okay, maybe you can put that person under a bar. But I will have to ask this question, and you'll have to be able to ask this of yourself when you work with clients. Is this the right test to correctly evaluate my client? Is this proper? Is it prudent? Or am I putting my client in a position of peril and risk? So let's take a look at this one, the leg press. So if you choose not to do a squat because you don't want to put a bar on somebody's shoulder, you now are confronted with the question of how much does that leg press sled weigh? We have the platform, or I'm sorry, you have a seat, the person sits in there, they push the platform, and in some cases, they sit down, the platform stays still, and they push the seat. That's a different type of leg press, but they both fall under the category of leg press. So now you're left to ask the question, okay, on one of them, if I'm actually pushing the sled, that's different than if I push myself and the platform stays still. Do I include my own body weight with the weight that's being pushed on the weight stack with that machine? So that's one big question. The other part of it is when you look at different leg presses, you know, different equipment manufacturers have different patents. They have different patents for a reason because they have different technology, and the different technology gives you insight, if you will, to the uniqueness of that equipment. So when you have this different equipment, sometimes they're nice enough on the placard to put like this platform weighs 85 pounds or this sled weighs 95 pounds. We have that in our fitness center at Harper. But, you know, to a certain degree, you have to question the validity of that. And then the other part of this is, even though it might be 95 pounds of metal, okay, well, if you look at the different pieces of equipment, some of those slide on rails and others hinge off of a pivot point. So if you look at this, this is very much like what we have in our fitness center. It slides off of rails. They state this is 95 pounds. Is it 95 pounds of vertical weight being pulled straight down to the floor? Or we know that the sled is at an angle, and these angles like this are actually a simple machine that allow us to cut weight and push things or move things more efficiently. So instead of pushing straight vertical against gravity, you're pushing at an off angle to gravity. So in actuality, is it actually 95 pounds that you're moving around? The weight that's involved might be 95 pounds, but because it's at an angle, it's actually going to cut the effects of gravity. Oh man, it could be a brain bender. But then you get into this. That's a different angle. That's more vertical. That's going to make the weight, even though it's the same amount of weight, maybe the platform itself weighs the same, that's going to give you a different feel than this one. And even the simple fact that the body position will be slightly different will give a different feel. Okay, so another brain bender for you. You look at this one, there's a pivot point back here when this gentleman's pushing against the platform. He pushes and the weight comes up and swivels up towards him. So you know from the effects of gravity that you have this curvilinear movement that's going to affect the weight or how the weight feels to the person differently than this one and this one. So when you're trying to do this and you're trying to evaluate how strong your client is and you're trying to roll them into these standardized tests, unless it's all I care and equipment standardized testing or Cybex equipment standardized testing, you don't know, and you're at a bit of a disadvantage when you work with your clients. And so it becomes how much, right? How much does this stupid thing weigh? Because your client will ask that. Well, that's great. I have 3 plates on there and I just did it 5 times, right? We talked about this in maxes and testing out. How much can I actually push? Well, you're going to come up with a number. And if you're going to use that 0.03 coefficient or an Epley formula or whatever it may be, you need to be able to understand how much weight is actually on that piece of equipment. So do you just negate that sled weight? Do you include it? How much is it? I can tell you, you get kind of a brain bender here where it's like, okay, how much does it actually weigh? And you're not quite sure. What I've gone to over the years is this: if I don't know how much a thing weighs in terms of like a sled or a platform or something I'm moving on a piece of equipment, I just count it as 45 pounds. Because I've looked at bars so often in my life that I know that a 45 and a 25 is 185. I know 3 plates is 315. I know that 4 plates is 405. I mean, I can just do that math in my head because I've seen it so many times that if I don't know how much something weighs, I just go right to 45 pounds for that, no matter what it is. And it might be inaccurate in terms of how much weight that person is actually pushing, but I can at least be consistent when I'm doing loading parameters with that client. So it becomes kind of a relative play. All right, guys, good luck with the rest of that assignment. Email me if you have any questions. Thanks.